want. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Treon, and I am an author, and then I was an editor at several newspapers for years before that, and then I got a job at Blue Handle Publishing, and so it's been interesting having gone from being an author and submitting and doing all that work, seeing how the decisions are made on the publishing side of it. So hopefully I can provide a little bit of insight into how small presses work, but also I go to enough writers' conferences and talk to enough agents and editors of those to, I think, have some pretty good insight into how major publishing works. And most of what I know about self-publishing comes from you fine people, because the Texas Panhandle has, I would say, per capita, like the most published authors, for any publishing and anywhere in the state that I've been to. And it's really incredible what we do up here. So anyway, hopefully we can share some information with you, and then we'll have a Q&A later and discuss whatever it is you all have on your mind. So, so this is a lot of text you're probably not going to be able to read. I have it mostly up here for me. But this was in the newsletter, and it was posted on our Facebook group, and I believe Katie should be able to put this on the website later. So
it's already on the website.
Yeah, so you can read about us and who we are, but Christine did want me to go into a little bit about how Blue Handle came to be, because it's a little bit of a unique story, but it's also not that unique for these days in publishing. Charles D'Amico, who is our president, wanted to self-publish his novels, like many of us do, and the difference between Charles and a lot of authors is that he's also an entrepreneur who has done very well for himself in several different areas. Right now he's focused on being Jimmy John's franchisee, and he now has all of the Jimmy John's here in Amarillo, the ones in Lubbock, the ones in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and recently at least 3 of them in El Paso. So he does that a lot, and as I'll get into later, that really helped with our capitalization. But he self-published, and he made some of the mistakes that some people do. Didn't pay quite enough attention to formatting, did not find the right type of editors, and didn't do much proofreading. About the one thing that people did enjoy for the most part were his covers, and he outsourced those. Didn't try to build those himself, which a lot of independent authors do. And once he realized that he was making those mistakes, he saw somebody else in town, Andrew J. Brandt, who was also independently publishing, but he was not having the same sort of comments and Amazon reviews that Charles was getting. And Charles, being an entrepreneur, said, okay, I can turn this into another small business, which is what he has been doing his whole adult life. And so they sort of partnered together, but Charles provided the capital like his restaurants, and also did all of the legal incorporating and all that stuff because he's very familiar with it. And he bought Andrew's backlist, which is all of the titles that he previously published, and gave Andrew a small advance for, I believe it was 3 of his upcoming titles. And so that was sort of how Blue Handle Publishing came to be. Now, Charles, if any of you have met him, you know that he has no problem speaking his mind and speaking it loudly for everyone to hear. Not that he's obnoxious, but he's a very outgoing person. For a writer, he's very outgoing and loves to talk to people. I wish he were here giving this presentation today instead of me, but here we are. So, so he got a story in the newspaper, in the Amarillo News. And while he was doing that, a young woman named Madison David had been laid off due to COVID from working at Workman Publishing in New York. And they are, what we'll get into later, they are a major publisher, one of the largest independent publishers in New York. Their big nonfiction title is Water for Elephants, and nonfiction is What to Expect When You're Expecting. And she was working on the sales side of it, and the marketing, and so she knew how to market and to sell, big titles. and she worked directly with Amazon, and she worked directly with independent bookstores and that sort of thing. And so she was home after having lost her job due to COVID in New York. And she approached him and said, "Hey, I have this skill set. Does it sound like something that you could use?" And Charles was like, "Oh yes, very much." Because he was beginning to figure out that selling books is not at all like selling sandwiches. It is very different. And then probably about a week later, I got wind of the story about Blue Handle that was in the Globe News. And so I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I'm an author, former newspaper editor, and I've been editing my friends' manuscripts as I can for a while now, and they've been telling me I should do this professionally because they're really enjoying my level of work." So I said, I would love an opportunity to do a couple of your books, even if it's going back and doing ones that I feel like might need a polish. And so he said, "Okay, we'll start out doing that." And then about a week later, I was working on the project, and he said, "Tell you what, I'm just going to go ahead and expand, and we're just going to make this, make you one of our principals." And so he basically said, "Hey, what would your title be?" And so I told him, I looked up on Google, editorial director. He said, "All right, sounds good," and And so that's basically how the company came to be in its current form. I would say it was about not quite a year and a half ago, whenever all that got finalized, and so we stopped putting out new books, even Charles's books, and he has about 15 of them, that he has the drafts for that he needs to get into the editing system. And so we really worked on branding and on getting ourselves out there to the publishing industry, which is something that Madison was very good at because she had those connections from New York. And so anyway, that was kind of the formation of the company. And we've since put out, actually I was at a book launch Tuesday. I've been on the road a lot. Tuesday in Nashville for the second book since all of us sort of got together. And we have our slate for next year kind of mapped out, and then we're starting for the year after that. So we're starting to look at the end of 2024 and on to 2025 here in 2022. And so when you're running a publisher, of figuring out in newspapers you were always one day ahead. So I sometimes had to keep a hard time keeping track of what day it was. But in publishing, you're looking years ahead. And so it's nice not having those crushing deadlines, but you're putting stuff into the works now that you're hoping is going to pay off in a long time. And I'll get into a little bit more as we go. So I want to start out by giving some definitions, because the publishing industry has very few rock-solid definitions on anything that they do, because it's very creative and it is also very versatile and things change all the time. So these would be definitions for today's discussion and when I talk to people, but it definitely does not have to be definitions that go beyond this room. So if you are an independent publisher, you publish your own books, or you only publish another author's books, believe it or not, some people act as a publisher, but they only publish another author's books. That is what we're going to call self-publishing, but you don't have to tell anyone else you self-publish, because I know that not everybody takes that the same. But the three levels we have are major publishing, independent publishing, and self-publishing is what we're going to call it today. Major publishing are going to be the publishers who can afford the massive distribution they can get at every Barnes & Noble and every Burrowing Owl and every Poison Pen type bookstore in America, and they can offer their authors 5, 6, and 7-figure advances. This includes the Big 5, which at this point is like the Big 12, which has like 7 teams now, I don't know. But they are owned by large, often overseas conglomerates. And so that's what makes them the Big 5, as they used to be called, was the definition that they were corporate owned and not owned by a single family or a single entity. Now, Amazon Publishing, not KDP, but your Thomas & Mercer and those type of guys, they definitely fit into major publishing because they're publishing some of the biggest books and offering some of the biggest advances in publishing, as you can imagine, because Amazon rules the world. But they're technically only owned by one company. They're owned by Amazon, so they would not fit that definition of the Big 5 being corporate owned. And there's also very large independent publishers who do offer large advances and large marketing budgets, and they compete with those Big 5 and with Amazon. An example of those might be W.W. Norton or FS&G. And a lot of times those publishers also win major literary awards, which help boost their sales, which help the amount of money that they can give to their authors and put in the market. But basically, if they're large and they're in New York, generally speaking, they're part of that major publishing group. Independent publishing, for our discussion, is going to be small presses like us. Many of you are familiar with Fox Press because I know Jody, the publisher, Jody Thompson, has come to a lot of our things. And many of you probably know of different other small presses. I also work with one called Black Rose. But there are a lot of us out there, and there's a reason for that, which we'll get into later. And the one definition for an independent publisher is they must publish titles by more than one author and by authors who are not the employees of the company. So like if, say, Blue Handle existed and they only published my books and Charles's books and Madison's books, well, they wouldn't really be a publisher. They would be, we would all be self-publishing in some sort of group. I imagine that happens. I haven't heard of it, but still, we publish other people's titles in addition to Charles's books, and most of that's just because, like I said, the way the company was founded, he has a pretty good backlist and they sell pretty well. So, it helps keep us. I'm not going to say profitable, but it helps keep a revenue stream going. Now, some independent presses, and especially the larger ones, they partner up with major publishers for distribution. But the catch is that the major publisher takes their cut of the profits of each book. So that's when you get more distribution, but everybody down the line makes less money. So, do you want to do that? Do you not want to do that? That's what the people in the front offices always discuss. Take a drink of water. And so self-publishing, they are publishers who only publish titles written by one person. That is, generally speaking, the author. That's what most of us in here do. The author, they can be incorporated or not. On Amazon, I can say independent publisher, or you can create, an LLC. You can have a logo and all that stuff. But that company serves only to publish one person's book. And like I said, it's usually the author themselves. But if I were to start a company called Ricky Treon Publishing, but I only wanted to publish Christine's books and not my own, it would still be, it would still fit this model if I'm only publishing one person's book. And there's always a team behind the author publishing, as you all know. So that's not to say that it's a one-man shop, and that's not to say that it's what people used to think of self-publishing. A person finishes a draft, hits the end, makes their own cover, and then just puts it on KDP. That is no longer the norm. People do that, but usually you can tell by the cover and the Amazon sample that they've done that, and so their sales usually reflect that. Now, the bonus is hybrid publishing, and this is one that it started out real bad, and it hasn't got much better. A hybrid publisher is a company that requires authors to pay fees to get their books published by this hybrid publisher. But then the hybrid publisher takes a cut of the royalties, as any other publisher would. And this is what they call predatory, because they're getting money on the front end and they're getting money on the back end, and the author usually doesn't get hardly any money at all. And it's a business model, and they get a lot of people to do it, and it's unfortunate. Now, hybrid publishing is different from vanity publishing, which is where there are a lot of companies out there. You can submit your PDFs and your documents, pay them a fee, and they'll ship you a box of books, and that's the end of the transaction. You're free to do what you want. That's vanity publishing, and that's been around since the Gutenberg press. If you want to get your books published, like say I was a professional speaker and I toured the country and I wanted to have books to sell back in the room, I could go to a vanity publisher and buy them for $3 and sell them for $5 and make a couple off of every one I signed. And there are a lot of people that do that. But they don't really put them on sale for the general public. They're not on Amazon or anything like that. And there's also, hybrid publishing is not a services company, which only charges for the services rendered to help authors in whatever capacity they need. And so that's where we always have to be careful when we handle publishing to discuss this, because we do have a services platform that Christine was talking about called Book Puma Author Services, is how we rebranded ourselves. And so, what Charles and I feel in Madison is that, we can only publish so many authors under Blue Handle, both because of the amount of resources we have, and also because, that piece we're trying to make profitable through the publishing business model. But we also feel like we have some talented people that work for us. Me and the editors that I picked to help edit our books at Blue Handle, Madison with her sales skills, and then Charles, he has a background actually in psychology, so he's really good at helping people get past the writer's block. He's helped me, he's helped a lot of people. And so we do offer services where you can pay for those things, but if you pay for anything for Puma, Blue Handle cannot publish you. And if Blue Handle wants to publish you, you get all of those resources as part of the deal. The money only flows one way, and that's the difference between a hybrid publisher and a traditional publisher. Is the money only goes from publisher to author. In the traditional model, in the hybrid model, the author pays for things in order to get their book published. And so we have two separate companies, even though Charles and I are both sort of the overall in charge of both. But I actually don't do any of the editing for Puma. That is my lead editor, Amber Guffey, and her team, and they do all of that. And we actually they earn more money whenever they're doing work for other people and not for Blue Handle. So they have even more incentive to take care of our paying clients in addition to our books. And so that's the little discussion on that. But essentially, for most authors, if you're seeking out somebody to help you edit or to help do your book cover and that sort of thing, that is where we fall into. We help out with that. You all probably have all the companies that you like, or all the freelancers that you like to work with, and that is what a service, an author services company or freelancer does. They are not actually publishing your book. So now that we've discussed hybrid publishers, you don't want to confuse that with the new term that's coming out, and it's pretty new, called hybrid authors. And those are authors who write usually for major publishing, and they also self-publish titles, usually under a pen name and in a different genre. And they do this, one of the homegrown examples is A.G. Howard, who has written many successful books, New York Times bestseller, for a major publisher in New York, but she also started her own self-publishing company just like a year or two ago to publish for new adult, because she had been publishing for young adult and her fantasy stuff, but she wanted to switch genres and switch the age range. And her publishers and her agents said, well, you have a brand, and we really can't do that. And so she said, well, yes, I can, because the technology exists, and so I'm going to do it. And she wrote a really great blog post about it. I forgot to link it in here. I might give that to Katie. Maybe she can post it on the website. But she basically did a real thorough analysis of why she chose to do this, and she has 3 or 4 books out under her own self-publishing brand, and she loves it. Well, at least she did last time I talked to her. And then J.T. Ellison, who I've gotten to know really well over the last few years. She's a New York Times best-selling author of psychological thrillers, but she wanted to write, and it's not really in a genre, which is part of the issue for her and her publishers, but they're sort of like CIA thrillers meets a fantasy world. And they're primarily fantasy, especially based on the covers and stuff. And she went with the pen name Joss Walker, and she started her own publishing company, and that serves only to publish her books and some short story collections under her pen name Joss Walker. And so, they were already New York Times bestsellers, these two, and then they decided that I wanted to write my own stories, and the big machine in New York that is major publishing said, hey, we don't want you to do that because you have your own brand. But they were able to do it on their own. And, I haven't heard anybody think that's a bad idea. So that's what a hybrid author is. And why do they do it? Because, like I said, major publishing is a big machine, and when authors want to go outside of that box, they usually have to do it on their own. and or on their own, being without the financial backing of the major publishers. Now, why would these New York Times bestselling authors self-publish if they wanted to go a different direction, as opposed to going with an independent publisher like Blue Handle or Fox Press or someone like that? And the answer is, for most of the time, the same reason many people self-publish, and that's total creative control. Because if they're not going to sacrifice little things to get the money in the marketing and the money in the advance, if they've already said I'm not going to do that, well, then they have a very clear vision of what they want to do, so they should just do exactly what they want to do and hire people to help them do exactly that. And you know, that's one of the great freedoms that that current technology provides, is that we can put out exactly the piece of work we want, and you know, we can not have to make those sacrifices that authors do when they want to get into major publishing and even independent publishing. Because you know, this is kind of a funny story with you know, with the second book I published with Fox Press. I didn't get to see the cover until the pre-order was live. I got the link saying your pre-order was live on Amazon, and that's when I got to see the cover. Luckily, I loved it. But you know, I have no input, I have no say, which is totally the norm in any kind of traditional publishing, being independent publishing or major publishing. But if you self-publish, then you are creating the cover, you usually in collaboration with graphic designers. And so I think a lot of that goes to show that the perception by readers of self-published titles, because you all are getting so very good at it, is that they can't tell whether or not it was independently published or published by someone like Blue Handle or one of the big five or major publishing. And if that line hasn't faded, it's on its way. And so you just have to do it correctly. You can't be the person who gets to the end on their first draft and does a quick cover and then puts it out. You have a team of editors who you trust, people who help you with your covers, and then you can have the same quality book as anyone out there. So then why even submit to Blue Handle? Why submit to any independent publishers? Because a lot of authors, and I'm one of them, are not interested in creating or sourcing their cover, their page layout, and that sort of thing. And I should have put editing up there. I just, you know, that's something that I do, and I have friends in the journalism industry who help me, and then, you know, obviously I had a publisher to help clean stuff up. And, you know, if you, those of you out there who do publish your own books, you know that it is an investment. There's upfront costs. You have to pay for all that outsourcing before the book goes live, and you can make any money off your royalties. And then there is also awards. Have not caught up with the times. Book awards have not. The Silver Falchion is actually a very good one. You can be independently published or with a major publisher and get onto those. That's with Kim Nashville, who I've spoken to some of you about. But yeah, most of the time the awards do make a clear delineation between self-published and not self-published. And some of the self-published awards are actually getting very competitive. Writer's Digest, you know, they're one of the biggest ones for independent authors. But yeah, that's another reason why one might want to go with a small press. And let's see what happens. So we'll save that. And you know, so to answer a question you may have later, Blue Handle has closed the submissions right now, with a few exceptions. You know, that I would have to talk to the person. But we, whenever we opened our doors up, we got a ton of submissions that we are still trying to wade through. You know, 6 and 9 months later sometimes, and I feel awful. But you know, those usually do. You know, you're trying to catch up on those whenever you were late at night, you know, trying to fall asleep, or you know, waiting for an appointment or something like that. It's a deluge, because there are a lot of people out there who write novels and who write good novels. So the difference between a project we would take on and we wouldn't. A lot of people say, I have self-published these books, would you take them on? And usually, like if it's exceptional work, we would take a look at it. But most of the time, we don't offer anything beyond what you are already doing as a self-publisher usually, because we, you know, we, like most small presses, use the same print-on-demand technology. We are actively working to try to get into some distribution partners and things like that. But all we would be doing is taking even more of the money that you're already giving to Amazon. That's the reason why a lot of independent publishers don't pick up self-published books, is because if they're being fair, if they're being honest with the authors, because we don't offer a whole lot for the money we would be taking. If they say, well, you guys are known for, your books are very well edited, and I struggle with that, we would say, okay, well then, you can hire one of our editors for an upfront fee. That's fine, but we don't want to take your royalties in perpetuity if that's all we're adding. And we don't have, we do help with marketing, but not to the point of a major publisher, and that is a lot of what major publishing, that's a lot of their value add, is they have enough capital to really push books out there, get them in all brick and mortar stores and that sort of thing. But the reason I went with Fox Press and Black Rose, the independent publishers, as an author, is because, I just wanted to write and do the words part of it. I had no interest in learning to do the rest, and if my books had never been published because of that, then, that's how it was going to be. And maybe I would get to the point where I really want to get my book out there, and I would learn how to do the rest, and I would, find a second job to finance the extra, the book cover and all that stuff. And who knows if that would happen. But, fortunately, I was able to find publishers who were fine with, hey, if I just give you the manuscript, can you turn it into a book? And they said, okay, that is their value add. And so that's what we would do, handle is take your manuscript and turn it into a book that, is as good as any out there on the bookshelves. And that's, where, the three sort of columns of the triangle, I know that's not the right metaphor, that I discussed earlier. You have me, using my, expertise with the words to make it, read and be as polished as any book out there. Madison with the marketing. She, in fact, has our authors going to the Mountains and Plains Independent Booksellers Association convention. We already went to the spring one, they're going to the fall one. And so we actually have our books in bookstores all the way from North Dakota to California to Florida, and especially in the Mountains and Plains region, because we reach out to those booksellers and we put our authors out in front of those, and that's at our cost. They charge a fee for us to do that, but that's worth it to get our authors and our books in the hands of those booksellers. And that's something that a lot of independent publishers don't do, because there is that cost, but also because there is the time that you need to take off to do that. I know that Black Rose doesn't do that. I'm not sure if Fox still does or not. I think they were at one time. I'm not sure if they still are. But that's the sort of thing that Madison adds. And then Charles, in addition to heavy work on the covers, he provides a lot of capital. We're looking to make money, in over the next decade, not over the next month. And that's how you have to look at publishing. You can't start out a publishing company with no money. And those of you who run your own independent shops know that the return on investment does not come quickly. And that kind of gets to my next slide. And these are some numbers, and some other ones have come out with that Simon & Schuster PRH lawsuits. Some of them I find dubious, and I haven't done enough research as a former reporter, so I need to do some more research before I present that stuff to you. But these ones, they have pretty good primary sources. But around 30% of books published by major and independent publishing, because you can't really major the independent part of the self-published. That's Amazon's not giving that out, and most self-publishers don't make that readily available on their website. Even if they did, there's so many that you couldn't really keep track. There's a system in place to keep track of these. So around 35% of books that are traditionally published are profitable, which actually is not a terrible number. Like I would have expected it to be a little lower now that I'm in publishing. And then just 4% of books account for 60% of all book profits. Now that number is a little more eye-catching. So you know, that means that just a small fraction of the books that are out there in the bookstores or available on Amazon from traditional publishers are making up all of the profits in publishing. And I couldn't get my hands on anything super recent in terms of how much money the whole industry makes. And again, it is so fractured that it's hard to really get that in one place. But I'm here to tell you that major publishing is doing well for itself. You know, it's billions of dollars. So if that helps put that into perspective. And then last year, fewer than 1% of the 3.2 million titles published in traditional publishing sold more than 5,000 copies. And like I know that there are other statistics that have come out that make it sound even worse than that. So I'm dubious of some of those numbers, but that one right there is still very surprising that only 1% sell more than 5,000, because to make the New York Times bestseller list, you're talking sometimes 30, 40, 50,000 in a week is what puts you on that type of list. So that just goes to show you that if you are not selling 20,000 copies of your book a year, you're still doing fine, because there are very few books that are selling that many. And this is also, you know, 5,000 copies in a year. A lot of times that's also going to be over the lifetime, because most of your sales come within that first year. Most of those come in your first 6 months, and most of those come within the first 3 months of your release, because that's when if you've done a pre-order campaign, you've done a good job of building a lot of buzz and getting it out there, and people have pre-ordered it and they're interested and they're excited and they get the book, and then, you know, they take the time to read it, and then maybe they recommend it to someone and get another sale, and so that number drops off. And the big five publishers, now that's not all major publishing, again, those are the corporate owned, the ones that you think about here: Macmillan, Hachette, PRH, Simon Schuster, and Hachette. They account for 80% of all books sold in America, not counting, like I said, independent publishers, which are self-publishers, which would make that number even higher, or lower, but still, 80% of all trade books sold by traditional publishing. And so that is why, you know, they are the goal for authors who want to make a living at writing books. Because if you want it to account for your entire income, then the big five and the major publishers are the ones that can give out those kind of advances and where you can make those type of royalties. And that is the end of my, so then why would an independent publisher, self-publisher, why would we even get into this game if it seems like, you know, there's this big gorilla and the rest of us are getting the table scraps? Well, there's no other industry that I can think of that I've found that anyone's told me about that rewards tenacity like book publishing does. Because on average, an author and the publisher won't see real financial success until about the fourth or fifth title has been released. And I'm working on number 5, so here's on. But no, that's the statistical average, is that by about that time you have a backlist that can actually make money, so that when your book does break out, then people are going to go back and read those. And that's sort of the Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point. And you have to invest time and money, knowing the payout does not come over months or even years, but, you know, usually over decades. And that's why publishing is such an old business. And the ones that are still around have been around that long because they saw the financial success coming, and they waited those decades to see that return. And they do that because you know, the publishers, although there's a lot of business involved, that you know, means you don't publish books maybe that you would, even if you love them creatively. They do love books, they do love literature, which makes that risk worth it. And there are a lot of publishers that go under. There's one called Midnight Inc. It was an independent publisher. You know, definitely bigger than Blue Handle is right now, but definitely not anywhere close to the major publishers in New York City. They had some great books, some award-winning books by some really talented authors. And they had a big backlist, and they went under during the pandemic. And part of it was the pandemic, and part of it was just that was the trajectory where they were going. They did print on demand, and they did paperback only, and then they started doing small print runs, and they were growing, but the growth stopped. And they weren't able to recover from that. So, you know, that happens a lot. I know that there was an independent publisher, you know, there's been a couple here in Amarillo that have started and stopped, and Sometimes the people who are running it retired. Sometimes, they just didn't want to be publishers anymore. But, for whatever reason it is, independent publishers seem to come and go a lot. But, no matter what, I've never met somebody who wasn't in this business for the enjoyment of books more than they were for the money. And talking with some of the authors who do write for the really, really big publishers, and Taylor said this whenever he was here, I guess it was last year, speaking to you guys, that yeah, he knows that he's a part of he's a cog in a really big machine. And he makes compromises, and everybody has to kind of do their part to get to this goal of selling a lot of books, and it's very different. Most independent publishers, one of the reasons why I like being in this space as opposed to maybe being an editor for a much bigger publisher is the creative agility that we can have. We can publish whatever book we want, and we publish fiction and nonfiction. It's a really, really fun space to be in. And so if you're in this room, you want to be a independent publisher, or you want to be published, and we're all a group, and you are my people. So I'm glad to be here. I think I don't know what time it is, but I should need a break for some more water, and then I'll come back up and talk a little bit more.
Yeah, let's get a break.
Creating a cover or editing a book or uploading to Amazon, those things, those little pieces don't take as long. But yeah, like vetting submissions.
So you're talking about the time frame is for like the whole package, not the individual piece, like an editing piece or a book cover piece?
Yeah. So, okay. That's always an interesting discussion. From the time we sign a contract until the book comes out, usually, 18 months-ish, maybe longer. Some of that is because of how early we try to get uncorrected proofs to folks like Publishers Weekly and that sort of thing. But what I wanted to talk about to start the second half is a question that a lot of people have that I think is, if you follow editors and acquisitions editors, which is what one of my jobs is at Blue Handle, is determining what projects we want to take on, and we can't take on a whole lot, so it's even worse than I thought it would be in terms of turning people down, and that's the worst part of my job is sending out rejection emails. But what it is that you can do to stand out among the submissions that come in, and that's if you're trying to go with major publishing, then you're trying to do that usually to get on top of an agent's radar, and then they sell it to the acquisitions editors, or the independent publishers like us and a lot who take unagented submissions. And you always want it to be as polished as you can get it. And then some people do. Some people have even hired our book room editors to give a polish before they send out to agents and stuff like that. But more important than any of the writing mechanics, assuming that you only have a few typos and your punctuation is mostly like assuming it's not a very, very rough draft, are character and voice. And I'll start with voice because even as an author, that was hard for me to understand what that even was. But whenever I read a manuscript and whenever a reader reads a book, what they're looking for is a voice that they, not everyone hears narration in their head when they read, but a lot of people do. And so your author voice is your word choice, but it's also, do your characters ask themselves a lot of questions and answer them, or do they make a lot of long sentences, or do they think in short, choppy sentences? And a lot of times, we work on the craft, and we know, the do's and the don'ts, about having different paragraph length, different sentence lengths, using active verbs, not using passive voice and that sort of thing. And once you have all that nailed down, the author voice being how does your main character communicate with the reader? How does your narrator, whether it's third person or first person, whether it's present tense or past tense, how are they communicating with the reader? And that's where you can not necessarily break some of those rules, but you can give your writing a little bit of flair and make it, that's sort of the creative part of the creative writing. And so that voice, something that sounds a little bit different than what you read before. So take, for example, one of the best books I've sampled recently that had a great voice was called Don't Know Tough. And it's by Eli Craner, who is Arkansas born and bred, and his book was set in high school during high school football season in the Ozarks in Arkansas, so I guess that's northwest or east. And the way his character spoke, and did not use proper grammar all the time. In fact, that was part of it, was he was very rural, and so he was thinking how he would speak, how people there really speak. And then you had a coach who came from California, who is not of the South at all. And so he had a completely different voice that he thought in and that he spoke with, and bouncing those two off each other did a really good job of, painting a picture of these people without going into description. Like, I had no idea, some of the physical characteristics of some of these people for pages, but it didn't matter because I could picture them based on how they were talking to me. And so a lot of that is when I talk about voice. And even then, I know that's a very amorphous definition, and it's not something that I could put on PowerPoint and say, if you do these three things, these will improve your author voice. That's not quite how it works. But having that will help your manuscript stand out to agents and to editors if that's the route you want to go. And obviously, if agents and editors are looking for that, then you have to trust that they are trying to publish books that readers want to. So even if you are self-publishing your books, then that's something to think about that you might offer your readers. And then the other thing is character. And people give classes on character development, and so I won't try to do that here. But if you can have characters who are very, they jump off the page. I know it's kind of a cliche thing to say, but somebody who you connect with, who if depending on your genre, if they make you laugh out loud, or if reading their interior dialogue makes you kind of a little bit afraid if it's a psychological thriller. If it's, and even if it's literary fiction, you think about the characters that have stood the test of time. Gatsby wasn't a narrator, but descriptions of Gatsby and Holden Caulfield and those type of people. They were very, very unique, but they were not caricatures, and that's the line that's hard to cross. Because I read a lot of books where the character, or a lot of submissions where the characters are over the top, but they are caricatures and they aren't characters. There's not a lot of soul in there. And how do you get that? Well, you have to dig deep within yourself, because all characters that are on the page come from the author. They come from somewhere in the author. You as an author can model a character after somebody if you like, but the emotions that you put into that character have to come from your own emotions. And if there's no, what's that they say, there's no feeling in the author, then there's no feeling in the reader. Whenever I write deeply emotional scenes, I have a physiological reaction whenever, and so that's when I know I'm really touching on something good and I need to lean into that. And if I'm writing a scene that should be scary or should be sad or that sort of thing, or emotional, and I don't feel that reaction myself, I know that I need to dig a little deeper. And my critique partners, helped me out with that a lot over the past few years. So I thought I might start off by answering that question before it was brought up, like what do you look for when you're reading manuscripts? Those are the two things that really stand out. The plot has to make sense. It has to work. You know, and I used to when I first started, and one of the reasons I got behind on submissions was I tried to get through everything to see, you know, if I liked the plot or not. And then the more I talked to other editors who are far, you know, bigger and better publishers than mine, and who, you know, have published some of the best. When I started talking to them at these conferences or through the different writing organizations that I'm in, I realized that, you know, the plot can be worked on. And I found that editing, you know, the books for Blue Handler and giving editorial notes, you know, if the ending's not great, you can work on that. If the climax needs higher stakes, you can work on that. But if an author's voice and their characters are not already there by 20 to 50 pages in, then that's not something that's salvageable. That's just not something you can't infuse that into a manuscript. It has to be there, and my job is to bring it out. But if it's not already there, there's nothing I can do about that. And a plot I can fix. So if you have any questions about why haven't I gotten the feedback I wanted from an agent or an editor, I would say that you know, take a look at what you've written and see if you've done yourself as much of a favor as you can in those two areas. And if you're not sure how to diagnose that yourself, we've got some great critique partners in this room, and ones who usually would be in this room. I know that the parade really kept some people away, but you know, we're all pretty gracious readers, and so, you know, if you find ones who are honest, they can tell you, like, yeah, you know, your main character, he's a good guy, all right, but there's nothing there that's really making me really care for him, or, you know, make me want to take this journey with him. Or they can tell you, like, yeah, you know, the streets are very clean, but there's nothing in the way that the interior monologue is going, in the dialogue that's really, you know, making me smile. It's not, you know, interesting and fresh. Hopefully they would put it better than that, but I am very exhausted, so I'm not finding all the right words that I want. But anyway, so that's the one question I wanted to answer for myself. Does anybody else out there have any questions for me? Yes?
Do you do nonfiction?
We do. We publish nonfiction. In fact, we have Jerry Gray is a NFL coach who, you know, former All-Pro at Texas, and, you know, former NFL All-American, not All-American, that's college. But no, we're publishing his book next year, and we are in the works for a couple of other nonfiction books with some folks. And a lot of nonfiction has to do with the platform we have, and that's just, you know, there's no other way to put it. If we don't feel like, you know, you can reach an audience or you have an audience, it's a hard sell. We are also in negotiation with a memoir from a woman who was kidnapped and taken to Mexico, and she escaped. And a really incredible story. It's been in the news, and so we're trying to see if we can get her memoir. And so that's another way that nonfiction works. I myself do not write nonfiction. In terms of editing nonfiction, I would probably not be the best for developmental notes, but we have people on our staff who specialize in nonfiction. So, but yes, we do publish nonfiction. Yeah.
Where's the name Blue Handle?
Oh, so Charles and he, what is he now? I think he's at 41 or so. He's a fairly young guy. Before the movie Old School came out, his nickname in college was Blue, and that's what people called him. And so he took his nickname, and you know, he moved here to the Texas Panhandle and has really enjoyed living here. And so he combined Blue and Handle, and then designed the logo and did all that stuff himself. But yeah, it's an interesting, weird name. But yeah, Blue was our founder's nickname, and then Handle from the Texas Panhandle.
Is your home office here in Handle?
So we all work from home because we formed during COVID. But yes, we all do live here in Amarillo, and we do get mail at the Chase Tower, or whatever the heck tower it is now. And we have the use of their conference room where we need it. But the technology is such that, you know, you don't have to really meet in person to put out a book, and most of the conversation happens in track changes and comments in Word. So You know, I enjoy the tales of, you know, Max Perkins working with Hemingway and Tom Wolfe and then bringing in stacks of paper and all that stuff. Like, I think that would be cool, but no. We all work from home, but we do occasionally get together just to meet because, yeah, we are a company, we are people, so we probably should get together every once in a while. But no, we don't really have any offices to speak of. Anybody else?
One more.
Okay.
Do you have a list of suppliers like people who can go on apps, help you lay out a nonfiction book, even though you don't have a book?
Oh, that sort of thing. So right now we are only doing straight narrative. So yeah, there are no maps, and Jerry Gray's book, you know, has little subsections and headers, but no, we don't have any vendors for drawing of maps or illustrations, and that is another thing I guess I should address. And as the trades know, putting out a picture book and a children's book is very different than putting out a novel, and there's a lot of different working parts and multiple people that we don't have to you know, utilize. So yeah, we don't take children's books. If one were to fall on our lap completely done and we loved it, we could probably figure out a way to publish it. But again, would we be the best choice? What would be our value add? We wouldn't have any value add. You should just self-publish it and take your full cut of the royalties. But no, pictures and illustrations, that's not our wheelhouse yet. If we grow like we want to over the next 5 years, then yeah, we could hire staff that does all that type of stuff. But that's not what we do right now.
One last question.
Okay.
Do you publish plays, or what's the market for short plays?
You know, plays and screenplays, there is no market. I think in part because the writers have not ever built one. But you can Google plays and screenplays and just find them out there. So they are not really for sale anywhere. So there would be no point in us trying to charge for anything like that, because, you know, screenplays and plays, they are an instruction booklet for the play and for the film or TV series. So that's the finished product that people pay for, is what's on the screen or what's on the stage. And so the scripts are not something that are really saleable. And so yeah, we definitely don't. Now, if someone on our Book Puma services wanted us to take a look at those, like Charles and I have worked on screenplays, and we actually do pitch our books and other people's books to Hollywood production companies. So you know, we could offer some advice, but no, we don't sell anything like that. And I also want to mention, if you want one of my business cards, I have them over there next to Christine. You can grab them if you want. If not, if you Google Blue Handle Publishing, I think we're pretty high on the Google machine, so we're pretty easy to find on the web.
I thought that was my last question, but this will be. Who decides your covers?
Charles is usually the one who takes. I'm sorry?
For any book that you publish, who does the covers?
Yeah. So our founder Charles, he usually comes up with the concepts and takes the ball to like the 5-yard line, and then from there it's sort of a collaboration. And then we have Amber Guffey, who is my number 2. She is also a graphic designer, so she a lot of times will fill in some of the back cover copy, which I write, and then we'll do that for the advanced copies, which, you know, is different than what we put out for the final. You know, she inserts the final words that go in there, and if we have to tweak the marketing copy, and she puts on the author photos and the bios and all that stuff. So that's pretty collaborative. But yeah, Charles is mostly in charge of that. And you know, there may come a time whenever Andrew takes over that full time. It's just you know, we're definitely trying to be very agile and play it all by ear, because who knows what publishing is going to look like 10 years from now, especially if depending on that Simon & Schuster, you know, publish Penguin Random House, how that lawsuit goes. And if any of you aren't familiar with that, I apologize. That would be another 2-hour lecture if I were to go into that. But you can look that up, and basically they're trying to decide whether or not those two can merge and turn the big four into the big three is essentially what it would be, and then they would have control over well over 50% of major publishing, as I said. And in particular, they were talking about books with advances over $250,000, so not something that we're very familiar with. But for those top elite books like that, if they were to control too much of that market share, then there's antitrust, and it's not monopoly, but it's like the opposite. I can't remember the word. It's really weird. It's a really weird legal thing. But that does bring up an interesting point about those books with those really high advances and all that. So most of the time, if we're calculating whether or not we want to offer a small advance, which we've done selectively, and we also have we work out different royalty structures with each author. Like it's we definitely customize things. But a lot of times when I'm pretty sure this is public knowledge, like Taylor Moore, his advances were approaching, but did not quite meet that $250,000. So usually those are based upon how many units they actually think they'll sell. So like take that advance, that $200,000-ish, the Taylor got for his book. Hachette, William Morrow printed 200,000 copies of his book. And with the royalties being what they are, they're pretty much saying, okay, yeah, we think that this is how much we would pay in royalties anyway. So we're just giving you that 2 week advance so you can write us another book. Because the secret to being a publisher and making money is we have to have authors who write books that we can publish. We have to, that's how we get our product, right? And so that's why you hear about publishers giving authors extension on their publishing deadlines and all that, because hey, we want the book when we want it, but guess what? If you don't produce a book for us, we can't sell it, and we don't make any money. So that's the leverage that you authors kind of have in that situation. But that's pretty much 1-to-1 ratio. They're giving him the money. They think that he's going to make royalties anyway, and if he earns out, then gets more royalties on top of that. But once you get to the $1 million, $2 million advances, those are more for prestige. Those are because we want to publish Barack Obama's book. We want to publish J.D. Vance's book. We want to publish last year's Nobel Prize winning book. So when you hear about those huge advances, up to a couple $100,000, it's usually based on how many books we think will sell. But the ones that are really that high, that's about we want to have that name on our roster. So that's an interesting way to look at it. So when you hear about those huge book deals, that's usually what that's about. It's usually about branding and ego, honestly. But then your mid-listers like your Taylors, like Jody and Linda and those type of guys, yeah. Like they look at a P&L sheet of profit and loss and they try to do their best guess. And they almost always, authors at that type of level usually earn out and earn royalties. But a lot of times at the lower levels, authors don't earn out. Like I was, that slide I showed you earlier about only X amount of books ever sell more than 5,000 copies. So, and that's a guessing game, which is why a lot of times when we're talking with authors, they prefer to have a really good royalty structure as opposed to an advance when you're on the smaller independent publishing level, because we have no idea whether, we hope a book is going to break out and we hope that it'll sell thousands of copies. But, we're not playing in that world and we don't know. So we would rather give you more money for the books that you actually sell than the other way around, because if we take too many big losses, then we're out as a company, right? So if you want us to keep publishing your titles, then we also have to stay in business. And that's not actually my forte. I'm learning more about that as I go. I'm a words guy, and so the business is left to the other two. But it's very interesting, the things that you have to consider when you want to publish a book, because I've had 2 or 3 that I'm like, oh, this is, I would love to have this on our roster, and this is gonna, people are really gonna enjoy reading this. And there's just a lot of stuff to consider. And I know that there's a perception out there that if I'm a novelist, I need to have 10,000 Twitter followers and blah, blah, blah. The truth is that that does help. Like, we do look at that, and anyone who says that they don't is lying to you, or they just don't know what the other people in that company are doing. But if you are willing to help in the marketing, is a big part of it when you're a smaller press like this. If you are at least willing to go live with us, even if you don't have your own Instagram account, but if you want to have us host you and just go on and talk, or Zoom and the things we do, if you are willing to go to those bookseller conferences and get you in front of people who run the bookstores, you know, in this part of the country, and introduce yourselves to them and pitch your book and say, this is why I think it should be on your shelves. If you're willing to do that kind of stuff, then like I said, you know, company pays for all that. You're not out of pocket anything. You know, that's a big help in determining whether or not we can take a project on. And the book also has to be really good, you know. And then that's the bottom line. If we found something that was undeniable, you know, then we would probably find a way to make it work. But those questions are asked. You know, how much time are you willing to put into making your own book a success? Because that's the value out of the major publishers. Is, yeah, they can take a manuscript from J.D. Salinger and anyone like him who doesn't want to do any reviews, and they can put enough, you know, money behind it to make it work. But we want to get there, but we're not there yet. And that's you know, and that's why a lot of times, you know, self-publishing. We tell people sometimes, like, you know, especially if they have self-published, like, you know, that might be where you want to go, because we cannot help you the way that the Big Five can help you. And I think a lot of independent publishers get themselves in trouble by not doing that type of thing, by taking on too many projects and losing too much money. I really think that that's an issue for some people. Yeah.
Okay, you know how you said you don't publish screenplays. Do you publish memoirs? Like Peggy Roach,
Yeah.
national bestseller.
Yeah.
Like hers are all memoirs.
Narrative nonfiction, yeah, that's definitely something we would publish. Now that is one where the platform and the story would matter, but also, you know, like if it's an incredible story, then we also might be doing a disservice to the author. If they haven't really reached out and gotten a ton of rejections from big-time agents and stuff like that, then we would probably advise them to try that, and we might even, you know, work with them on that, you know, if they wanted our help on our services side. Because, you know, that too, we don't want to publish a great story and only have the reach that we have, and then have the author sour on us because we did not sell 10,000 copies whenever they obviously had a story that was worth selling 100,000 copies of their book. And in publishing, having that type of relationship with the authors and the other editors and stuff that are out there, it's a small world. And so, you know, if you get a reputation for, you know, hey, they'll publish anything, and, you know, they're not selling a lot of copies, and don't go with them, you should really try with the bigger guys, like, you know, that would be damaging to us. We wouldn't get the same quality submissions. So we want to try to help people do the best they can with whatever they send us. Sometimes that's, you know, us publishing their book, and then sometimes it's us recommending them to other publishers or, you know, other agents who I have either met with or who my friends are their authors, and say, hey, they kind of specialize in this. Why don't you submit there before coming back to us if you get rejected by everybody? Which I know sounds weird for me to say, but the worst thing we would want to do is put out a book and have people feel like they made the wrong decision. And that happens a lot in publishing, especially on an independent level. And it's interesting how when we tell people, like, hey, you know, I would go and publish this book independently for yourself, they're like, oh, so you just hate it? No, I really like the book. If I thought it was a bad book, I would say don't even self-publish this. Would be my recommendation. But, you know, we have to look at what we're adding to what you already have going on, and also, you know, there's a large investment in time in putting out a book, and if we're taking on that burden, do we think that we are going to sell more copies than you can sell yourself? And if the answer is no, then nobody wins in the situation. So why would we want to do that? And, you know, like I said in one of the slides earlier, you know, the prestige of getting traditionally published by anybody versus being self-published is disappearing. And as an author, the more I'm learning about how to put together a book and all that stuff, I'm probably going to put out a collection of short stories as a reader magnet to get my newsletter numbers up, and that sort of thing, because I feel more comfortable with it now because, I've done some of the layout and I know how all that stuff works and I've helped with all that. So I definitely think that there are so many ways to get published now. You just have to be really choosy about who you go with and why you're doing it. And what I always tell people when they come to me, like I have this manuscript, but I don't know what to do with it. I always tell them, picture yourself, having been published. Like don't worry about the process. Like when you envision yourself, your book is out. Are you signing books with a huge line at Barnes & Noble? Are you on the New York Times bestseller list? Are you holding a copy that is exactly the work you wanted to put out? Or is it something else? What is your vision? Whatever you dream about, this book has been published. What is that dream? And there's a way to get there, and it's just the same. It's not the same for everyone. So if we can figure out what it is you want, then helping you get there is the ultimate goal, I think, is what it should be for a lot of publishers now. The major publishers, they have stockholders that they have to answer to, and they have profit margins that they have to hit. We're fortunate now that we don't have that, but that is the reason why when you hear people like Taylor say, yeah, I'm a cog in a big machine, that machine is built for printing money. What we do is generally not. So there's a lot more of that creative fire in there, and there's a lot more, what do you want and how do we get there? Which is usually where I like to start any conversation with an author, whether they've submitted to us or whether they're seeking out the bookkeeper services. Yeah.
What kind of work is Blue Handle doing with agents, or are you only just doing direct submissions?
We've had some agented submissions, and there have been a couple that we wish we could have published, but didn't. And if when the agents are coming to us, there's usually a lot of times there's fundamental issues with the manuscript that we tell the agent. We say, if they want to work on these things, we give them a revise and we submit. But yeah, if an agent is coming to us, then usually there's a reason, I would say. But yeah, we have taken agency submissions, and in fact we have a couple right now that that we're kind of in soft negotiations with that we're hoping will pan out, and those would be for bigger. They're actually both nonfiction, and they both are people with platforms that. One of them is through connections we've made networking. One of them is the gentleman is just tired of that big machine. And he doesn't need the money, and so he heard about us through like a friend of a friend type of thing. And so his agent reached out to us, and we're like, yeah, we will. But let's start talking. So, but the reason we're even getting agent submissions is because I'm going to these conferences, and Charles and Madison are going to bookseller conferences, and we try to make ourselves very out there. And that outreach, it's not cheap, and it's a lot of time. But we feel like if we put in that work now, then we will attract the stuff that will make us money, that will start snowballing upward, or whatever metaphor I should use, spiraling upward, I guess. Anything else?
What is sort of the manuscript wish list of Blue Handle? What niches are you actually looking for generally?
We had that internal discussion, and right now our list is so small and we're so new that we feel like if we were to put that out there, we would limit the type of stuff we could get and the type of quality. Obviously, if it's me personally, I write crime fiction, I read crime fiction, so that would be the deal. But Charles is much more nonfiction, so his manuscript wishes would probably be a lot of nonfiction stuff. Madison would definitely be literary fiction. She went to that Oxford publishing deal over in England, and so that's kind of her scene. So the good news is that we all have different stuff that we like to read, and even the editors that we have on staff, a couple of them are really They really enjoy fantasy, and like Jordan Reed's book, I know some of you know Jordan, The Wizard's Brew. That was, that ended up being something we're so proud of because it was fantasy, and it definitely scratched that itch. It was definitely a hard-boiled mystery, which really got my attention. And then, the improvements we were able to make in the story and in the line editing and all that, me, I'm a worrywart. For those of you who know me, I can worry about stuff. I was worried it was going to fracture the audience too much, and it was going to not be enough fantasy for one, not enough mystery for the other. But we found that a lot of people from both of those readerships have come and really enjoyed the book. And so right now we want to publish stuff that we really like and that we think is going to do well in the marketplace for what we can achieve with our current financial situation, how much money we can put into working and all that. As we expand, we've talked about, if we have certain books that are really hitting and we develop a reputation for publishing these type of books, we may say, okay, Blue Handle is going to be specialized in this. But there's no reason why we can't create imprints. That's what the big five are, right? William Morrow is a subsection, that Taylor publishes with is a subsection of HarperCollins, which is the major publisher. So there's no reason we couldn't have Blue Handle. Let's say we really hit it off with nonfiction, so they can be our nonfiction, and then I could come up with some, TRE Press, and that would be our crime fiction imprint. And so a lot of that is branding, and that's what Charles does really well. He designed our logo and all that stuff. Like, he's really got a kind of a brain for that. But that is where imprints come in, and then I would be only reading the submissions for crime fiction, and he would only be reading, and that would be amazing if we could do that, because then we could all read submissions that are in our wheelhouse. But that's all planning for the future, and right now we're looking 3 to 5 years to hopefully be able to make some of those kind of bigger moves. Hopefully.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
How many are on your staff?
Let's see. So there's me, Charles Madison, Amber, and then we have six editors below Amber, so 7, 8, 9, 10, I think total. And we don't do freelance. They are part-time employees. The editors are, and we pay them bi-weekly or whatever that term is, every week. And some of them are busier in their personal lives than other times. Like, some of them are teachers, so during the summers, whenever they get the bulk of work. And then some of them work from home, so they're more available. And then we also have, I wasn't counting our social media ambassadors and that type of stuff. Some just people who are involved in the production of the book. And like any company, how busy we are comes and goes. So some of those folks are kind of, we call them up whenever we have overflow. Hopefully we get to the point where they are our core. All of them are our core editors, and then we can hire even more. But yeah, that's about the number we have right now. And then you have a question.
I'm a guest today, Treon Long, and I appreciate very much you bringing me as a guest. I am in the situation that I assume some other people are. I've had 4 books published, and with Vicki Shane, and she's one you made a reference to earlier about some of the publishers not making it through, and she just cleaned that. She just stopped. I didn't know anything about this, but I just got a letter that it was over, and I've got the 4 books published, and they are still I just tested it the other day, and I ordered one myself, and they're still there working, but I don't know who's doing what, and I know nothing about publishing, and I really don't want to know much about publishing. I would like to have someone who would be my publisher, and I'm not in for big money at any means. This is a fun thing that I do. So how would I go about finding someone who knows how to take this over and just keep my books? You know, I don't know how to do any of that.
Well, the first step before, like say us or most publishers, would be to make sure that you have your rights back, and you know, you have to get a formal letter from the publisher, and it might have to be notarized. I would have to like ask Charles to ask our lawyers. Like, I'm not sure. But you know, there's a procedure for making sure that you have your rights back, because until that happens legally, you can't have them published anywhere else, even if the publisher goes under. And I think at the Canadian Writers Conference 2 years ago, or when the last time they had it, there's an interesting discussion, or it was the West Texas Writers Academy, where you know, a company shuttered, but they did not expressly give all the authors their rights back. And depending on the contract you sign, sometimes it happens by default, sometimes it doesn't. But believe it or not, those titles then become, what's the word, assets for the company. And if they were to go into bankruptcy or something like that, then they actually can be sold to a completely different entity. And sometimes that happens with Disney stuff when Disney takes over, you know, a company. And obviously that's probably not stuff you would have to deal with specifically in your case, but make sure that you clearly have your rights back either through the original contract you signed or by a letter from your publisher saying, yes, you have all rights. Because before that happens, a publisher really can't do anything with your back. And once you have that, then then you know, it's you know, figuring out if you aren't interested in self-publishing, then yeah, you have to find another publisher. I would make sure that you have any sales numbers that you've had before, because you know, if they're not great, then you know, hey, that is what it is. But if they're good, then that's a selling point to potential publishers in the future. So if your publisher can give you the sales numbers of your books, that's also a plus. That's something that's good to have in your back pocket. And then from there, yeah, a lot of it is just submitting like you maybe did the first time. I don't know how you get your current publishing contract, but submitting to editors. And if it's a series you want to continue, you might be able to find an agent for the new book and for the backlist. That's sometimes difficult, and the unfortunate truth is that all publishers, because of the way that readers work, they like new things. They like the first in a series. They like a debut novel more than anything else. They like you know, the standalone type stuff. So you know, usually what ends up happening is if submitting to new publishers doesn't work. I know, talking about Midnight Ink, that publisher that shuttered I mentioned before, some very well-known publishers, they ended up getting the rights back and ended up you know, self-publishing their old series and just starting a new one. And I know that sucks to hear, but publishers are always very reticent to take on backlist unless it has a proven sales record. And so that's, you know, that's my advice, is to make sure you have that information if a publisher asks. But yeah, step one is definitely making sure you have your rights. Yeah.
Should the current publisher take them down from everywhere they're at?
And that was, you know, that usually goes hand in hand with giving you your rights back. So they should not be allowed to, like, if they sent you a letter that says, hey, we're done, then they should have taken your books down from Amazon. So I would contact, and because unless you are getting direct money from Amazon, but I assume that your publisher was paying you, you know. So right now, if someone orders your book, they're getting that money, and you're trusting them to send you your cut of the royalties. So I would ask, like, hey, if you're really done, then you know, please take my books off of Amazon, and it's probably just a KDP Amazon bookshelf, and it should be really easy. So because then once you have that and your rights back, you'd have to get a new cover, you'd have to do a new interior design, but then you could put them up by yourself and start, you know, making, you know, the 70% or whatever you would get from Amazon immediately. And I'm sorry to hear that happen. Like anytime an author gets orphaned like that, it's always tough to hear. But anyway, that's my immediate advice. And then once you have all that done, then looking out there and see who publishes the work that you like to write, and continuing on the publishing journey, which is never a straight line. Never a straight line. Anyone else?
Well, you just hit on something. You said publishers like new stuff, like debut novels. And you actually said the word standalone. Mm-hmm. So that brings up my question. Of course, I write romance, so
yes,
they're weird in general. Yeah. But we were, early on when I started writing, you have to have a series. You can't sell anything that doesn't have series potential. The joke that I heard a few times over my recent travels is, what the difference between a novel of suspense and a thriller? About $100,000 on your advance. And what that is, it's kind of a marketing joke. Like your publisher, and the other question that was asked, somebody asked is, I write this. It could be this, it could be that. What should, and I want to, be traditionally published. What genre should I tell them it's in? Like that's the wrong question. They tell you what genre your book's in. Is usually the way it works. So what I would say, when you're pitching, you can pitch it as one genre or another. That's when you have the control. So if you don't want to write a series, pitch it as women's fiction, not romance. Because women's fiction, those think like Ellen Hildebrand or whatever her name is. And actually Jody, she writes women's fiction is what they classify her books as now, even though she started as romance and she writes series. But yeah, pitch it as women's fiction, and then because even Big Little Lies is technically women's fiction. It's just also upmarket is what they call it. But yeah, that would be my advice. And in terms of being pressured into writing a series, that's very real. Publishers want that. They want to publish first in your series, and then want you to publish 15 books after that, so that by the time you get to number 15, the money is just automatic, from every time you put out a book. And that is a business model, a publishing business model, and I have realized trying to do it that I don't think that's me. I think I'm a standalone person, and it's harder to secure bigger, longer term publishing contracts like that. It's true, and romance would be especially. I cannot think of a romance writer who writes standalones. It doesn't seem like there's a market for that. But there's definitely a market for standalone women's fiction. So that would be my advice. And to do that, to differentiate between romance and women's fiction, you just have to make sure that there are a lot of other things going on than the central romance. I think is the risk. Like take Jody's books. They are 90,000, 100,000 words, and so are Linda's, and hers is even historical, which adds another layer. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of the romance in there, but there's also just a couple of really great stories being told at the same time. So that's and so when you pitch it, make sure that you are pitching some bigger overall story with a romance at the heart. Maybe I would have to look at the actual story, I suppose, before I start writing a query. Yeah, bigger overall story. There's this.
Now, and if it's too steamy, you can't get away with being in this fiction either.
Right now, it's not.
I see. There you go.
But there's a place level different. There, don't they?
Other questions? I'm not sure what time it is. It's about noon. I'm not sure. Is that usually about the time we wrap up?
Yeah.
So probably time for one or two more if anyone has them.
Last call. Anybody for that?
Yep. Yeah. Let's go ahead and.
Before we.
I think that works. Let's call for the raffle, and I thank you all very much for listening to me. And see you guys for the raffle.
If you think about a question on the way home, shoot us an email.